As Republicans return home, protests have suddenly erupted. Are these protests a genuine expression of public dissent, or simply a media spectacle aimed at discrediting conservative reforms? Breaking news today.
Hello, and welcome to That News Show, where we discuss the latest facts, fakes, and hypocrisy as reported by the legacy media. Let's roll the tape.
MSNBC reports that Republicans returning home from Washington are facing local protests over the Trump bill, sparking a debate. Are these truly spontaneous uprisings or merely the latest act by activists determined to undermine every Republican achievement since the last Democratic administration? Perhaps the true danger lies with a political class fearful of losing its control. Consider this. The so-called protests have erupted just as Republicans have passed legislation prioritizing American taxpayers, introducing tax relief, strengthening border security, and restoring common sense. Why is it that whenever Republicans attempt to rectify previous errors, we hear that democracy is under threat? Let's get into this.
And his focus was, of course, on delivering a rescue plan to help address the economic damage it was causing and to help get all sorts of equipment out to people, whether it was tests or masks or things to help people address and prevent them from getting COVID.
Missing from the discourse is an honest evaluation of how federal spending priorities have shifted. The mainstream media continues to emphasize government-driven rescue plans and the distribution of equipment such as tests and masks. By making difficult spending cuts, implementing work requirements for able-bodied adults, and reallocating funds to critical areas, like rural hospitals and border security, these policies reflect core conservative values: fiscal discipline, local governance, and a cautious approach to federal involvement. These protests tend to support the continuation of expansive government programs and dependency, rather than addressing genuine grassroots concerns. Despite this, media narratives predominantly support increased government spending and continuous emergency measures, seldom addressing the limitations of such interventions or the burdens they impose on taxpayers. It's noteworthy that the most vocal opponents of Republican reforms are often activists and political figures who organize protests and amplify dissent through coordinated campaigns. True recovery will not be achieved through more bureaucratic distribution of masks and tests, but through policies that stimulate American innovation and reward diligence. It's time to move past the fear-mongering and orchestrated outrage, holding all political parties accountable for prioritizing the interests of American families and taxpayers. The Republican-supported legislation now under scrutiny actually represents a move toward balance. This shift is vital as we confront the potential threats of recession and escalating inflation, consequences of prolonged, unchecked spending and regulatory excess. The dialogue needs to shift from an endless loop of government rescue operations to a focus on empowering communities, bolstering small businesses, and reinstating the economic freedoms foundational to this country's strength. The media's preoccupation with equipment distribution overlooks the fact that many of these programs have concluded, and funding for public health initiatives is being reassessed, a necessary step to manage the national debt and enhance economic stability.
Republicans have never even tried to answer that question, not coherently at least. But looking what is in the bill, it's pretty clear to me that the problem they were seeking to address is, I guess, that the wealthy in this country have too little and they pay too much in taxes and the poor have too much.
The Republican stance is straightforward: cease penalizing success, reward hard work, and allocate federal resources to overlooked areas like border security and rural health care. These measures are designed to keep more money in the hands of those who fuel the economy and generate jobs. Critics, often supported by certain media outlets, portray these reforms as harmful to the social safety net. The latest bill aims not to favor the wealthy, but to address the imminent expiration of the 2017 tax cuts. The opposition's narrative, propelled by activist groups and some media, focuses more on maintaining the status quo, a status quo that contributes to soaring deficits and reduces incentives for work and innovation. By making the Trump-era tax cuts permanent, the bill would prevent a tax increase of over $4 trillion, protect small businesses from higher rates, and maintain the enhanced child tax credit for millions. The core disagreement lies between proponents of government-driven redistribution and advocates of economic freedom and local governance. As election season approaches, this debate is set to intensify. The alternative is a regression to high tax policies, increased regulation, and pervasive government interference that hampers economic growth and undermines the autonomy of American communities. Accusations that Republicans lack a coherent response to the nation's fiscal challenges overlook the substance and objectives of their proposed legislation. This approach underscores the principle that government should provide a safety net, not a permanent crutch. The choice is clear, not between aiding the rich or the poor, but between fostering dependence and offering true opportunity for all.
In congressional districts all across Georgia Tuesday, constituents demonstrated against President Trump's spending bill.
The organization of Monday's Stop the Billionaire giveaway bus tour says those in favor of this bill aren't looking at its harmful effects to the greater population, such as Medicaid restrictions, food assistance, and rollback tax credits on clean energy.
Everything you just saw, that package of protests across the country from all over the place, is just from the past 3 days. And there were more.
Coverage of the protests in Georgia's congressional districts over the Trump-backed spending bill showcases MSNBC's tendency to amplify left-leaning outrage while downplaying the substantive merits of Republican reforms. This oversight is notable, especially as the segment criticizes Republicans for betraying working-class voters without acknowledging the fiscal challenges inherited from these policies. Visually, MSNBC excels in creating a sense of urgency. This one-sided coverage reinforces a narrative of Republican wrongdoing while overlooking the economic impacts of expanding entitlement programs. This omission paints the bill as an assault on vulnerable populations, whereas it actually aims to restore fiscal discipline and promote personal responsibility. Republican lawmakers should not be deterred by manufactured outrage or media theatrics. The broadcast lacks balance and objectivity, primarily featuring Democratic officials, union organizers, and progressive activists, with minimal input from Republican lawmakers or policy experts who could explain the bill's rationale. Protest footage is edited to maximize emotional impact, focusing on close-ups of distressed constituents and symbolic props that underscore a narrative of betrayal. The segment heavily relies on emotional appeals, such as die-ins and dramatic sound bites, rather than providing a rigorous analysis of the bill's provisions or its long-term fiscal implications. This style sacrifices detail, failing to contextualize the scale of the protests or acknowledge their orchestrated nature by national activist groups. The segment highlights analysts who warn of rural hospital closures, but ignores the $50 billion allocated to these facilities to offset reimbursement reductions. The absence of opposing viewpoints, especially from Georgians who support tax relief and regulatory reform, challenges the broadcast's claim to journalistic fairness. Critics of the bill in Georgia are quick to condemn the Medicaid and SNAP reforms, but offer no workable alternatives for managing deficits or the impending expiration of tax relief for working families and small businesses. This approach, favoring spectacle over substance, is not new and often occurs when Republican policies disrupt the status quo. The real choice is between fiscal responsibility and the failed policies of unchecked government expansion. It also portrays the phasing out of clean energy tax credits as disastrous, without discussing the bill's support for energy sector jobs or the need to balance environmental goals with economic realities.
Politics of fear. And those protesters understand how important it is to bring the ugliness of this bill into the light of day. That is the focus now. What we are seeing now is the beginning, just the beginning, of an effort to make sure every Republican who voted for this owns that vote. And it's not going to take one speech, even a good one, or one protest. It's not going to happen in one day or 1 week or even 1 month.
The media's focus on these demonstrations often perpetuates a narrative that Republican policies are harmful, without fully considering the long-term fiscal benefits of curbing expansive government programs. As we observe the unfolding protests against the recent legislation, it's evident that these are not merely spontaneous expressions of public discontent. The prevailing narrative suggests betrayal, highlighting that the bill disproportionately harms working-class Americans by reducing Medicaid and food assistance. The protests, while emotionally charged, often resort to symbolic actions like die-ins and tombstones to emphasize their point. While these tactics are effective in capturing media attention, they do not adequately address the substance of the legislation. Critics argue that the cuts to Medicaid and SNAP will deprive millions of essential services. It's important to recognize that these reductions are part of a larger strategy aimed at realigning federal spending priorities to enhance fiscal discipline and personal responsibility. It seeks to avert tax hikes that would heavily impact working families and small businesses, so safeguarding the backbone of the American economy. The economic challenges of 2025, marked by a potential recession and inflation, highlight the need for fiscal prudence. With the U.S. economy grappling with a projected decline in real GDP and rising unemployment, balanced spending and tax policies are crucial. Instead, they appear to be orchestrated by left-leaning activists and media outlets. The economic implications of this bill are complex. This perspective fails to acknowledge the legislation's primary goals, extending tax cuts to prevent significant tax increases and promoting fiscal responsibility. Can you believe this? The true danger lies not with the protesters, but with the globalist elites and their Washington allies who aim to keep you powerless and dependent. So consider this: who truly advocates for America and who is merely obstructing progress. Now, efforts to address these issues are met with outrage, which the media eagerly amplifies, attempting to depict Republicans as the antagonists while diverting attention from their own shortcomings. Yet, instead of constructive dialogue, we see left-wing activists, Democratic operatives, and their media allies creating uproar, portraying it as a grassroots rebellion. Here's the reality. There's a Republican bill supported by President Trump that delivers substantial benefits to the American people, including tax relief and enhanced border security. Be sure to comment below while dropping a like and subscribing. Until next time.